This episode today is special to me. It's a different episode in a lot of fun ways, and I reconnected with someone in hopes of having him as a guest on the podcast, and we had the opportunity to catch up by phone before we did this, and it's amazing to be able to go back and actually tell someone from an earlier part in your life the impact that they had on you, and that's what I'm getting to do today. And it's really special to do that. So a little bit of context: in the summers of 1994 and 1995, I was a member of the percussion section of the Chautauqua Youth Orchestra, the Chautauqua Institution in New York. And the man that guided the ship for those 2 summers and many other summers was my guest today. He was the conductor of that youth orchestra that had a lasting impact on me, and we'll talk about. But he's also an incredible educator. Has had an amazing music career in his own right, and I'm just excited to catch up with him and find out more about him. So, all of that said, it is such a pleasure to welcome Aaron Kula to the podcast. Sir, how are you this afternoon?
Thank you. First of all, it is amazing in life to come back to somebody who was a teenager and now, of course, an adult, a parent, a professional. So it's I'm very honored and flattered that you remember.
Sure. Well, the funny thing, and I haven't even had an opportunity to tell you this yet, but I work with some management companies around the U.S. doing some interviews for this podcast, and I had someone from Austin reach out to me about interviewing an upright bass player who started out in classical music, who is now a singer and bass player in like Americana bluegrass music. She's incredible, great singer, great bass player. She did a little bit of research on me before we got on the call to find out that she was also in the CYO both of those summers.
Oh my God.
That I was there, and she was just a guest on my podcast. Trish Imbrogno is her name. She told me to tell you hello. I told her that I would be talking with you soon. She was also a member and also talked about how much that experience changed the course for her as a musician. So as I told you on the phone when we talked, I don't know, it's been about a month ago, the seeds that you planted that you didn't even realize that are bearing fruit all these years later. How does that feel to know that it has to have quite an impact?
It does. In a way, it surprises me. It takes my breath away. It makes me feel very honored and grateful that at the time I really. We're all much younger, and we're just trying to pursue our career, trying to pursue everything that we've been trained to do as a young musician. And I don't think I understood the impact that I was going to leave for the rest, or for the next 30 years of people's lives. I knew that I was operating from a position of purity. I'm not that I'm so pure, but my intentions. I think I wouldn't just my intentions were really pure. I wasn't. For me, working with you guys when you were teenagers, it wasn't about, hey, I'm doing this because it's a step to something else. That wasn't my modus operandi. It was, I am here now, and I want to make this experience the most meaningful experience for everyone, me included, but for everyone. And I put every ounce of energy and every cell in my body to make that happen, just thinking that this was the most important moment of all of our lives. And that's only now, looking back as we do in our lives, we say, wow, at least my intentions, I was on the right track, because it left goodness in people's hearts, whether it was about music or about working together or about finding your own path, or about the passion. So that's how it makes me feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm I'm now a director of technology at a school, working with the next generation of young people. And I think that because of you and a few other notable educators in my life, I am doing what I love to do now as a result of having people that modeled what education should look like. So I thank you for that, because I owe my career to people like you.
Right. And I look at this as, I mean, I'm one, chink in the chain of evolution for everybody. I don't, and if that chink was a strong link to keep you going to the next one, then that was what it was supposed to be. And actually, I was very lucky because I also actually had those kinds of role models and those kinds of teachers that influenced me and kind of paved the way of what my vision was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those summers, you programmed some really challenging repertoire for the group.
I can only say we can only be that brave and courageous when we're young, because I look back and I look back at the repertoire we did, from whether it was Bartok and Chautauqua Orchestra, or you were in the orchestra when we did the Rite of Spring.
I was playing timpani one on that.
And I'm thinking, was I insane? Or because at that point I thought, look, anything is possible. And part of it is because when I was a teenager, I was a little rebellious. And I never liked when somebody said, you can't do this, or what makes you think you can do it. You're no different than anybody else. And so for me, in a way, I knew what I was trying to do with you guys as adolescents. I was really saying, I'm going to show you that you can do anything. And, even out of just pure bravery, because I look back and going, I must have been insane to think that, 14, 15, 16, 17 years can play the right, but we did it. And I actually have the recording, and it's quite amazing.
It's quite good, yeah. I will say that that's one of the things that I took away from those experiences, and just the faith that you put in us.
Right.
That we weren't going to go out on stage and embarrass you in front of a group of people, and it was never about that, right? It was never about and make sure you don't embarrass you, but you put faith, and you allowed us to take a risk.
Well, it was faith. It was allowing you to take a risk, but it was also the key factor here is that I knew I had great training at New England Conservatory and teachers from the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And, I was working with the best of the best of the best world-class musicians, soloists. I got to work with Yo-Yo Ma. And the one thing I knew, that if I did a really good job in preparing and planning and giving everybody as much information as possible on this is how you could do it, that we would make it. Whether it was, there's no such thing as a 100% perfect performance. Nobody can say that. We all, whether it's a slight note, even the best, greatest professionals, we strive for that. But I wanted to make sure that if I did if I used everything, all the tools I had to prepare each of you, and I would really be concerned about, I remember one of the things I did is I wanted to make sure early on in the summer, and I don't know if you remember this, but I wanted to make sure early on in the summer I learned everybody's name. There was 90 people in the orchestra.
Absolutely.
By the end of not even the first week, I had everybody's name down, because I wanted to make sure everybody knew that I needed the collective group, but I needed the individuals.
You would stand on I just remembering this as you're saying this, you would stand on the podium and essentially quiz yourself. You would go through the section and you would point at a player and you would say their name. I'm just remembering this now. Yeah, that's exactly what you did.
Did I? Wow. Wow, well, that's an amazing memory. That blows my mind. It sounds like something I would do because it was so important. I knew also when I was putting myself in your shoes basically, and I said I didn't want to be a nobody. I didn't want to be just a chair at a desk in a classroom. I wanted to be somebody. And I said, that's what every teenager wants, really. They want to be somebody. They want to be, they want to be seen. And so, right. So I remember,
Yeah.
so that was one, and that was, I remember I would go home after rehearsals, after I auditioned everybody. And I remember I would write notes to remember what people looked like and what they wore and what they played. So, and I would quiz myself at night. You guys didn't know this. I mean, I quiz myself at night, and I say, okay, I put that's the Jim and this and that and Sally, and I would really quiz myself on as much as I was studying the scores. I was studying the
Yeah.
people.
I think the other thing that I really took away from that experience was that, and funny enough, I was just interviewing someone else earlier this week about this and talking about how much so much of music is about process versus product, and how learning the process, learning how to learn and learning the process is so transferable to other things, to other disciplines, and how, we didn't walk in and read down the Rite of Spring and say, all right, let's go perform it, right? We took what
We had, by the way, let's be clear, we
we
had about 12 days. I want this one because it was the
yeah.
last concert always had the shortest rehearsal schedule. And it was, listen, I'm not telling you I wasn't scared.
Yeah, I was terrified. If I'm being honest, I was
But I
terrified.
didn't show. But I said, okay, no matter how scared I am, I said I better show them complete faith in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the thing was that you had a game plan. You walked into rehearsal knowing we were going to take it one little bite at a
Right.
time.
Right.
And essentially, and I think I said this to you on the phone, we were like project managers of this music, and we would kind of,
I let you.
piece it
Right.
out.
I made sure that I knew that this piece was so overwhelming, and I didn't even come to it until I was in college. I mean, I didn't study the piece until I was getting my theory comp degree from University of Minnesota, but I was 19, 20, maybe, and I never even heard it live until I was in graduate school. But I knew that the piece had to be given to you, given to the group, the ensemble, in digestible pieces, because otherwise it would have been too overwhelming. But as I built it, as I put the building blocks together, um, and and I turned it. If you remember, I remember I said, okay, this better be a fun project, not just a scary project. And I do know somewhere in the back of my memory, I was thinking, okay, if they're afraid, it will never work. And so I remember, at least I hope I did it right, that I tried to make it into kind of I'm using the word game, kind of a fun, and I made people sing and tap it and turn people around and do anything so that it wasn't about the fear of the piece, but it was about the fun of the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been skydiving, but I would imagine when, playing that last note in the performance and us all landing at the same spot, it has to be what it is like for your feet to touch the ground after skydiving. I felt like I could go and take on the world after that
Right.
moment. It was like we did it. It was incredible.
It was, and
Yeah.
I will tell you, I had to do a lot of persuading behind the scenes because I initially did not have, the faculty, whatever you want to call them, the the music faculty, which made up the Chautauqua Orchestra, the professional guys that were teaching you guys. I didn't initially have their backing on this. They were saying, no, that's not the piece you should be doing with these kids, and so I had to push back and I say, well, then when when will they get to play it? What if they don't? What if some of these kids never get to play it? Should we just not take the risk? Because their motivation was different from mine. Mine was about the challenge and the proof of that we can conquer the world, because that's how I felt. I felt we can conquer anything if we have a good logical process called music. Good rehearsal technique, and I had great teachers in the practice of rehearsing. And I knew there was enough talent in there that we could pull it off. But I had to fight the forces against me, and I will tell you, I do know that a lot of the orchestra members came to that concert not necessarily to cheer us on, but to see if we would fall on our face. But when we landed after the skydiving mission, they had to bow their heads to all of us, not to just me, because I conducted it, but the bottom line is you guys did it, and it was really breathtaking. It was. By the way, the piece is about teenagers too. So I remember I know I must have touched on that issue. I said, "Hey guys, this piece is about you."
It's about you, yes. I will tell you, but now after the fact that I did have one of the percussion faculty members come up to me after the concert and just kind of leaned in and said, "You guys did a really good job with that piece."
Wow, really that's great. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, they were there, and I do agree with you. What may be their motivation, why they went, but I'm sure they were all pleasantly surprised, like, wow, look at these teenagers. And it's one of the things I've learned working in schools is that kids will rise to the occasion, and if you don't tell them how difficult something is, they'll go for it, right? You didn't let us convince ourselves that it was impossible for us to do it.
No. I said I knew I was saying, look, this is a challenge, but I never said you can't do it or it's impossible or be afraid. Mm-hmm. It was never. I knew that would be death. If that's the language I had used or instilled fear. The only fear I knew I was instilling, and I know this because this is my philosophy, is don't come unprepared. That was the only. If you remember, the only fear is don't come to my rehearsal, without having done your homework. Not that you can't do it, but you got to do the work.
Yeah,
and
you would kick our ass if we showed up unprepared, and I appreciate that.
And it was real, and because I could talk to 90 plus people by first name, I knew there was a real sense of individual responsibility as well as collective responsibility.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that I pushed to the nth degree was person in the back left is relying on the concertmaster, and everybody just across the ocean of the orchestra, everyone needed everybody else. You needed to watch everybody's back.
Yeah, that's it. And you had no problem going down the line and saying, all right, let me hear you play this passage. Let me hear it. And it wasn't to intimidate. It wasn't to frighten anyone, but it was saying we're all accountable here. We're all the success of this concert is the sum of the parts, and we're all the parts of this.
Exactly. Right? That was my motivation to let everybody know each of you matters. So should I just not listen to you because you don't matter? So I kind of put it in a context. I'm not doing this to embarrass you. I'm doing this to show that you matter. You're not just one of 100. You matter because I need each person matters. So, and that was a different philosophy than I think some of the kids back then came with. I don't think they were held accountable individually at such a high level as I required in that experience.
Yeah. Well, Trish that I interviewed, she said, I felt like I had no business being there the first summer I was there.
Wow.
But, she said, but I felt that I was growing, and she felt more and more at ease and more and more. And yeah, like you're saying,
It was interesting because it's funny, that was their first year experience, but anybody that came back for second year, they were like hungry. They were like, okay, go ahead. I'll show you. It was
I was ready. I'm with you. Yeah. I will tell you, I left Chautauqua after my first summer with a level of confidence as a person, not just as a musician, but as a person that I had never felt before in my life.
Wow. Yeah. That's a heavy statement. I mean, I'm thrilled. I think, I remember wanting to make sure that when everybody left the summer, they would take something back to their home base that would influence and affect all the people around them at home, and say, hey guys, that's not the way, this is the way it's done. Almost like become the mentors now.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised that, right, that the leaving with a tremendous sense of not just self-adulation, but confidence, or well-earned confidence of accomplishing, accomplishing these major works that they couldn't do at home.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, and then I want to dig in and find out about you. I think that so much of confidence comes from feeling that someone trusts you. And I think that we felt that you trusted us with this music and with the idea of taking it in front of an audience and performing it, that you trusted that we were going to all land on our feet. So yeah, that's why I felt confident.
Absolutely. And I one of my techniques as a conductor is, as we get in the front part of the rehearsing procedure process, I'm very in everybody's face, and I'm really, and whether you realize this or not, as we were moving through the process day after day, and as we get closer to the end, I start pulling back and releasing. This is very important concept, by the way, conductor, for young conductors. Once you finish, if you've done a good job in the rehearsal, you need to step back and let the orchestra do what they have to do. And one of my first lessons as a graduate student was when my conducting teacher said, at first I was offended by the statement, then I understood it years later. He liked my style of conducting because, quote unquote, you stayed out of the player's way.
Yeah.
First, I was very offended by that. I mean, I was 22, 23, and I was very offended. What do you mean? I'm the conductor. I've got to. And as I gained more experience of going, yes, if you've done your job, let go of the reins, and kind of ride the wave. And I will have to say, the youth orchestra kids, I mean, because I did my job and they did theirs, it ended up, the performance was not, it was not hysterical. It was, hey, everybody, we know exactly what we're doing. And if somebody had a blip or something, that didn't matter, because the whole was there. And so I remember, giving, I do hope people remembered, even this many years later, that I did let go of the reins and said, okay, I'm done. My job is done. It's yours. This piece is yours.
That's it. Yeah, you absolutely did. You absolutely did. So we met in 1994, but I know nothing about what your musical life was like before that. Where did it all start for you? How did music come into your life?
Well, I think, everybody has their own journey. Mine was guided by my parents, because that's my father and mother were both musicians. They were both educators. My mother wasn't. They both played piano and violin. Growing up in Brooklyn and the Bronx, my father ended up going to NYU as a musicology and voice major, and then he became a cantor in the Jewish tradition and got his more advanced degrees and got his cantorial degree from what's called the Jewish Theological Seminary, JTS, in New York City. So the music was always, and I was growing up with rehearsals in the house. We had a Steinway. And so, like anybody, I wanted to be like my father. So, and we were always taking lessons. So, I have 5 brothers. Each one of us took different instruments: piano, cello, clarinet, and I took guitar. And we were always studying music. And so gradually one thing led to another. And then in college, I needed to get a job. So I got a job as a music director at different camps around the country, where I started learning how to conduct and lead musicals and, just, you do whatever you can do. And then going to the University of Minnesota, I decided that in order for me to be a better musician, I needed to study theory and composition. So, I was doing piano and I also play accordion. So I was doing so I was also always involved with ethnic music. So there was this duality of learning. I was always doing folk and ethnic and jazz, and I was doing classical music for the degree. And I continued that track, and then I went to New England Conservatory and got a double master's in theory and conducting, and I put them both together. The whole time keeping up with my professional accordion playing, because I could play klezmer and different ethnic music. And so music, I was always a multi-genre musician. And that's and then gradually conducting took over because I became principal guest conductor of Boston Ballet on the faculty of Boston University and New England Conservatory. And so conducting just seemed to be what I ended up doing until there was a little bit of a financial crash that we had in the, was it the 80s or the I forget. And as a guest conductor, things started going down. And so I picked up my, accordion and started doing much more orchestrating and arranging. And then I came to a place down in Florida called Florida Atlantic University and became the music director of a music archives. And the library director said, he was not a musician. He said, "Hey, I got 10,000, 20, 30,000 pieces of archival music. What do I do with them?" And I said, "Well, music is meant to be performed." And so he created a unique position where I became the director of a performance division at a library, putting on concerts based on the music in the archives. So that's sort of a nutshell story of the past 40 years.
Yeah. Do you think that having an understanding and appreciation for ethnic music of other cultures made you a better classical musician as well? Did it make you approach that music differently or with a broader understanding of it?
Absolutely. And I also think it sensitized me to really that classical music emerged from folk music, which sometimes people don't remember. And so this blending this blurring of the line of what's classical, what's folk, helped me become a better musician with respect to just basic rhythm, style, ethnicity, culture. The way you play, Dvorak is going to be different than you play a German composer, or the way you play the French music is different from a Strauss waltz. So it really helped me become a more cognizant musician is what I want to call it.
Yeah. I remember, it's funny, as you're saying all this, it kind of sparks these little memories in my head. I'm going to bring up another concert that we did.
Do you remember the pieces?
I do remember the pieces, and I didn't even think about the pieces until you just said that. You programmed La Valse and DeRozan Cavalier in the same concert.
Oh my God.
And
Oh my God.
Yeah, another what in the hell was I thinking moment.
Oh my
right?
God.
But to the understanding what an important lesson that was for us, learning how to understand the feel of a Viennese waltz versus maybe a French approached waltz between Ravel and Strauss. Just as you're talking about that, I mean, it's all folk music, right?
It's all, and not only that, the other, I'm going to say one of the very important lessons from my knowledge of, I used to teach ethnomusicology. Almost all of this music, when I say this, I mean this classical / folk music, especially the folk ethnic tradition of music, has been transportable for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Everything has been borrowed from everything else. And so therefore, now I'm thinking, why would I program those two pieces? Oh, yes, because the contrast and the similarities and the relationship between the two waltzes is because they borrowed from each other, but in their own way.
Yeah.
And folk music is transportable. It's very mobile because it's wherever the itinerant musicians went. It's whatever they carried on their back in their backpack, whether it was an accordion or a violin or a clarinet or whatever it is, the musicians had to adapt and adjust and embrace. I say the words adapt and adopt wherever they're going so that they can play the music of wherever they're traveling to, of the geographic region. So, it really taught me to look at all of this music in a way that there's both relationships, similarities, and differences, and identify what those differences are.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be amazing if people would do that with relationships to each other in 2025 and understand and embrace the the beauty and the differences instead of finding a way to be divisive about it?
Absolutely. I mean, humanity is humanity. It's what human beings. It's one human being. It's one.
Yeah.
We have faces, ears, nose, eyes. I mean, we're all human beings. The character differences is what the music is. How you play a French waltz versus a Strauss waltz, or how you play a two-step march by Sousa, or a two-step by Beethoven's Allegro. It's it's still rhythm, it's still music, but I would say the understanding of both worlds, the ethnic music, folk music, and sometimes referred to as world music, and classical music, and actually the classical composers were always borrowing from the folk traditions. Mozart's Turkish, the Turkish violin concerto number 5, and Dvorak's Slavic dances, and Brahms' Hungarian dances. I mean, everyone is borrowing from everything, and even Copland, borrowing from folk music, American folk music. So there's so many variables of inspiration.
Yeah, that's it. How has Jewish music informed you as a musician, as an educator, as a conductor? What has that relationship been for you?
So the journey of learning Jewish music throughout my entire life has been fascinating because most people don't really, even people in the Jewish community don't always realize that Jewish music is actually the quintessential world music. And the reason is the music over 2,000 years, 3,000 years from biblical times, and I don't want to get too academic, but I just want to explain it in a very simple way. The music evolved in what we call the diaspora because there was no one specific homeland. And I don't want to get into this is not about politics. It's just about where this group of people, this culture, this tribe, if you want to call it a tribe, whatever you want to call it. I'm not worried about the syntax. Whatever you want to call it, these groups of people created communities because they lived in the diaspora. They didn't have a home. Let's just say they didn't have one. It's not like Italians have Italian music. We know where Italy is. But the Jewish music evolved wherever there was a Jewish community. China, Russia, all the Slavic countries, all over Europe, South America. So what I ended up learning over the past many decades is that there is, no matter what somebody says, there is no one type of Jewish music because it belongs to any country that you go to. If there's Portuguese Jewish music, there's so many different variables of what Jewish music can sound like. You have to look at the community and the country it came from. So what it taught me is the international. I always make a joke at some of my concerts. In the 1920s and 30s, in New York City, publishers published a klezmer violin book, and it said on the title, it says International Jewish Melodies. I mean, well, what else are they going to be? So you have a Romanian melody, and you have a Hungarian melody, and you have a German melody, and a Polish melody, and they're all in this quote unquote klezmer book of violin melodies. So that's what it taught me, that it is. By the way, it helped me as a composer because as I create customized concerts, I blend different musical genres with, let's just call it, European klezmer melodies. And so all of a sudden it becomes kind of another generation of music that doesn't belong to this or that. It just belongs to itself.
Yeah. Have you felt any like internal tensions between tradition and pushing it forward? And how have you navigated those waters?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. The word tradition. Oh my God, you're opening up a Pandora's box. So it's really interesting because now the one thing that I know that is that from even going back to the Renaissance period, 12th century, 13th, 14th century, Jewish music sounded like the Renaissance period, but didn't stay like that. Then we got into the Baroque period, and Jewish music sort of sounded like Baroque music, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, but people's narrow understanding, I don't want to say narrow-mindedness, it's narrow understanding of what this tradition is, which is a word that I try not to use that because it's such a hard word to define. Jewish music has continued to evolve for every generation. So when I create these blended klezmer concerts, we'll call them, these blend where it's sort of part Havana and part klezmer and part tango, Argentinian tango. I have sometimes some of the more narrow-focused individuals come up and point to me and shake their hand. You're destroying our heritage. You're destroying our culture. When are you going to play the traditional klezmer music? And I have to say, you're talking about the music that you are familiar with.
Yeah.
And so it's, yes. So I sometimes, and Over the years, though, people have come to learn that I am much broader in my definition of what this genre of music is, and so they're more accepting. They're more, I mean, especially the people that are open minded to, oh, that I know that melody, but wow, I didn't never heard it that way before. So
Yeah.
I try to prepare in my concerts to say, now I'm going to play this melody that you all know, but I'm going to play it in a little different way. And I hope you'll keep an open mind as you hear my interpretation of it. And so what I've learned is if I prepare people at the concert with just one or two sentences before, then they're willing to say, oh yeah, that's okay. I like that. But you'll still play it the other way, right?
Yeah.
I said, yes, at my next concert.
Yeah. Well, and I think that whether people want to admit it or realize it or not, all music, even the quote unquote traditional music, was new at some point, and it was probably looked at like, how dare you do this since we've been doing this for so long.
Well, look,
It has to be moving forward, right, in a honoring and respectful way, but it has to progress.
look, let's just look at Mozart. They thought he was crazy. What was he doing with his variations? I mean, it's a commercial movie, but that's what I loved about Amadeus. I mean, it was because it really showed that people, just maybe you have too many notes, Mozart. Maybe just a few less notes, and Beethoven, who pushed the envelope of orchestration. Trombones at that point were only used. This is just an example. The first time trombones were used in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in the last movement, and trombones were basically used only in the church. It was used as sacred instruments, and here he used it in a symphony, and he pushed the envelope of dynamics and pushed the envelope of range. Every great musician, composer has always pushed the envelope of, I'm going to say it, push the envelope of tradition, because that's how we evolve.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Bartok did it. Bernstein did it. Everybody's and look, Bernstein was completely misunderstood. When he wrote whatever he wrote, whether he wrote his Kaddish or whether he wrote his Jeremiah Symphony, or his Mass. I mean, the critics didn't understand what he was doing. So we know that we just have to be courageous, trust our instincts, and know that we're not trying. The irony is they think we're trying. People say you're trying to destroy tradition. No, we're trying to expand tradition.
Yeah, I say that. I say that a lot at my job, is that change and progress are two different things, and we I'm not just changing something for the sake of it. We're trying to progress and improve upon what we've done before, honoring what came before, but moving it in a forward direction.
Right. And by the way, I will admit some of my ideas fail. I'm going to use that word, big F word. Some of them don't work. A lot of them do work. But in order for, we all have to experience a certain degree of, with a little f, failure, so that we understand how to create something that's successful.
I completely agree. So how did the Chautauqua gig come your way? How did that opportunity come
It's
your
like,
way?
I will say every conducting or music director job I've had was just out of luck, of sometimes being in the right place at the right time. An opening happened, and I was there. Even at New England Conservatory, or the Boston Ballet, I happened to be conducting at New England Conservatory. I mean, this is an example, and then I'll get to Chautauqua. I was conducting the New England Conservatory Youth Symphony, ironically, in their beautiful Jordan Hall, their professional concert hall. And that year, the music director of the Boston Ballet needed a guest conductor. He couldn't make all of the performances, and so I was there, and he had heard about me through one of the members of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and unbeknownst to me, he walked into my dress rehearsal for one of my concerts at the end of the semester and saw me conduct and said he probably could do it. And I found out he was in the dress rehearsal audience and called me over and wanted to meet me. And so the same thing happened at Chautauqua. I was actually working with the Erie Philharmonic Youth Orchestra in Erie, Pennsylvania. People know where that is. It's all the way west of Pennsylvania. And there were people from Chautauqua that came to the concert, and they had a youth orchestra, Chautauqua Youth Orchestra, that was doing mostly pop stuff and kind of low grade, stuff and it was conducted by the timpanist of the Chautauqua Symphony Orchestra, who was getting older. It wasn't going anywhere, and they wanted to raise the level, and so I just happened to be I was in Erie doing my gig there. And somebody saw me, one of the officers from Chautauqua, and said, "Hey, we really want to make it into a kind of a real orchestra." And so they invited me, and then that ended up being a 6-year stint, which was unbelievable. It was a great, great experience. And the last year, I think we got it up to like 92 or 94 people. It had like 30 or 40 my first year, and really pretty average players. And I traveled around the country. If you remember, we had people from all over the country.
All over the country, yeah. Was 95 the last year of the youth orchestra, or did it go another year?
There may have... No, that my last year was the last year, because what they decided to do, which I, educationally and sociologically, I don't believe it, but what they did is they wanted to consolidate the quote unquote student experience, and they took the college age orchestra and the high school age orchestra, and they put them together, and they increased the age. So it's because I was letting in, I had kids that were, some amazing kids that were 13, 14, 15, as long as they could play, but it was all high school age. But they wanted to consolidate, so they consolidated and just have one. They didn't want to have so much administration, because they would miss, two student orchestras. So that was the last year that they had a quote unquote youth orchestra, meaning pre-college, I called it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
But it was it was wonderful, because I traveled all over the country and seeing amazing people. And teachers. It was a wonderful, wonderful, 90, 91, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And also to see how it evolved. And I have to say, I'm very proud that my last concert and the last piece of the last concert was the Rite of Spring.
Rite of Spring.
Because
what a swan song.
What a way to, I like going, well, if I was going to have to leave, nobody can say it was because there was a qualitative issue. It was a purely financial, administrative decision.
Yeah. I didn't play the first half of that concert. We did two pieces. The first half was Mendelssohn 4, and the second half was the Rite of Spring.
We did Mendelssohn. Oh my God!
Yeah,
that's such a hard piece.
So
all these pieces, I'm thinking, I really had. There's a word. There's a Jewish word called chutzpah. I had, which means like gall. I mean, I just had to have. It's amazing. Wow. Well, I just believed that we could do anything if I did my job. I figured everybody could do everything. And.
It reminds me of this band in Atlanta that their catchphrase, because they will basically play any song that anyone requests. I mean, literally, they'll play anything, and their motto is "We may be stupid, but we're not scared," and that's really it is.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it was wow. And I looked at some of the repertoire that we did. I mean, we did Brahms, we did Tchaik 5. I mean, we did some very
The first piece I played there as a student as just finishing my junior year of high school, we did Cuban Overture by Gershwin.
Oh my
And
God.
that is a deceptively difficult piece of music.
What a deception.
There's a lot under the hood.
And I always tried to find pieces that were forgotten, that were great pieces. And that piece, because I was always looking for new repertoire to not compete with anybody. But it was that piece I found, and I said, wow, this is such a great piece, the Gershwin Cuban Overture. And it was deceptively hard, but it was so much fun to listen to and play.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
And I wanted to pick pieces that turned on, that would also turn you guys on, that would say, oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's it. The other one we did was Création du Monde, the Mio piece. I don't even remember that one.
Wow, that's right.
That one kicked my butt. That was a tough one.
Création du Monde. Wow, yeah, boy, you did some really good. You did some really good repertoire.
You did some great repertoire, Aaron. It was amazing. So you said something earlier that it sparked a question that I wanted to ask you, a technical question about conducting. How does your approach as a conductor differ if you're conducting an orchestra versus conducting an orchestra in a ballet setting? How is your approach as a conductor different?
Very, very different. It's like, and I had to learn that because I also conducted the Erie Ballet Company too, which is different from, and I also conducted Miami City Ballet. So the biggest difference is what is your, I want to try not to get too technical. What's your mission? What's your mission? So for the orchestra, it's actually pretty clear. Your mission is to lead and interact with the orchestra, period. End of discussion. Whatever that's, that, because then we get into what does that mean to lead an orchestra, but the bottom line is you're interacting with one set of parameters.
Yeah.
With ballet, it's much more complicated because after you finish the rehearsing with the orchestra piece, now you actually have to work with the dancers and be aware of what adjustments might have to be made on the fly as an immediate change based on what you're seeing on stage, because your eyes are level, your head is level with the stage. And and sometimes you need to continue to modify tempos and change things. And you have to, you're now, although you're still working with the orchestra is giving you a lot more room, and you have to have a relationship with the orchestra. They understand you're not trying to trick them or fake them out or turn a corner without having everyone understands anything can happen, and everybody's reaction is very, very immediate, because if a dancer is still in the air twirling and your last beat is bang, and your beat has to be when their feet land on the floor, you may have to hold up your baton. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, they're not down. And so the orchestra, you're working almost like with the dancers at that point, a little bit more than with the orchestra, and you're trusting that the orchestra will follow you at the drop of a hat, at the drop of a dime, just because there's another component of collaboration.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
it certainly
and everybody
does.
understands, and the orchestra, ballet orchestras understand there needs to be some really surprise adjustments, I call it. And the players have to have such an immediate, spontaneous reaction to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not so comfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you're going you're going a little outside the predictability of what you've done in rehearsal.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, you can't really give the reins over too much to the orchestra in that situation. Mm-hmm. Unless there's a given rule by the director or the ballet director, or that I don't care what the dancers do, you do exactly what you need to do. But that's a different directive.
Yeah.
It's an interesting experience, and you need to I remember I had one experience with the Boston Ballet where it was a very tall dancer. And by the way, in ballet, the dancers that are different heights need different tempi, because if they're taller, their leg is bigger. It takes more time to go up and more time to come down,
Yeah.
and so I was doing the Nutcracker, I was doing the ballet, and there was this very tall dancer, and you actually also have to know the personality of the dancers. That's another component. So he would be very tall and languish and take his time by putting his leg up and bringing it down. And so I thought what he was really saying to me was, give me more time. Apparently I was wrong, because he wanted the music to be push him and be in front of his beat, in front of his, a little bit in front of his motion, to push him forward. So at the end of when we're taking our bows, in front of 3,000 people at the Wang Center back then, the curtain comes down and he says to me, "Maestro, what did you think you were conducting? A symphony orchestra?" And he just turned around and walked off the stage.
Oh my.
And I because my tempos were too slow, because I misunderstood what this dancer wanted. So the conductor also must develop a good relationship, not only with the orchestra, that they trust you, whatever your gesture is, but with the dancers, because sometimes what you see isn't what they want.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
So very, I think it's
quite an experience.
It taught me to really, actually what I did after that is I always talked to the dancers before the performance, and I would go into their dressing room and said, "How are you feeling today? Ballerina, how, are you feeling, do you feel like you want the tempos to be pushed a little bit? Do you feel?" And so I learned that I had to also, I had rehearsed with them, of course, in the studio, but now maybe that day they didn't feel so, they didn't feel like sometimes I said, "Could you stretch it a little bit? Could you push me?" And so I would always talk with them before performance, just 30 seconds. "How are you feeling? What would you like today?" And they would tell me. So conducting for a ballet is not for everybody.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much just internal, some mental gymnastics required to do all of this and make it look and feel graceful while all of this is going on.
Right. And you want to make sure you do the right tempi and push the music, either push it or hold it back, because you don't want to hurt the dancers. The dancers are, they're trying to match the music. So you're trying to meet each other, because it's very important that you don't take music in a direction that might harm the dancers.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That's amazing.
It's interesting. It's really a lot of different experiences. Really, as an opera is a different, that's yet another different experience, but it's a little bit less complicated, because you're dealing now with another musician, and you can read each other really well, and the variables aren't that extreme.
And there's not as much of a physical requirement of that, so there can be a little bit more give and take, I would imagine.
Right, and you can really, if you're working with the singers, you can start seeing their breath, and their intake of air is the tempo that they want to go. So it's a little bit easier to read, and there aren't too many surprises.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very surprising field, I have to say.
Yeah. Aaron, I just want to tell you how much I've enjoyed catching up, and before we go, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier of what an impact that you've had on my life and countless other people my age that are out either performing music professionally or just taking the things that they learned under your baton, your ictus, if it will.
Oh my God, you remember the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Should tell everybody what that means,
just-
so they don't think you said a dirty word.
Yes. Yes. Yes, the moment of the downbeat. Right. Yes,
the point where the downbeat reaches the plateau.
That's it. I can't put into words what an impact those summers had on my life and changed the trajectory of my journey as a human, not just as a musician, but as just a human being, and understanding collaboration and just empathy and all of those characteristics that we all learned together in those rehearsals and performances. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of us today, but also back then. So I'm forever grateful for that, sir.
I appreciate inviting me onto the podcast, and I hope I've shared some funny and interesting and poignant stories with your group.
Best of luck. That was my conversation with conductor and educator Aaron Kula. Reconnecting with Aaron and reflecting on the Chautauqua summers reminded me just how powerful great teaching can be. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to the Bandwich Tapes wherever you listen to podcasts. Sharing the show with a friend or colleague who cares about music, education, or leadership makes a huge difference and helps these stories reach new listeners. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Bandwich Tapes.